Hey guys, tonight we journey into a world you think you know, but trust me, you don't. This isn't a story about kings in golden crowns, or queens in velvet gowns whispering secrets in the garden maze. No, tonight, we're stepping into the royal chambers, the kind that reeked of perfume, plague, and things best left unmentioned. Welcome to the secret, unwashed lives of medieval royalty. Now, before we descend into scented hell, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how this weird little sleep channel brings us all together. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft hum, and let's slip together into tonight's story. Tonight's journey. Why gross hygiene habits of medieval royalty? Let's start with this thought. If you traveled back to the 14th century and walked into a royal bedchamber, your first instinct would be to walk right back out again. Not because of danger, but because of the smell. Forget everything you've seen in period dramas. There were no daily baths with flower petals, no lavender-scented silk sheets, and absolutely no concept of body wash. Even the most powerful kings and queens, the ones with armies, palaces, and divine right, often reeked like old cheese wrapped in wool and left out in the Sunday. Yes, we're talking about royalty, monarchs, emperors, people whose faces were stamped on coins, whose signatures could start wars, and who routinely avoided water, like it was the Black Death itself, which, ironically, they also had. But don't worry, we're not here to judge. We're here to understand, to close our eyes, breathe through our imaginary linen nosecloths, and step into the gilded cesspool of medieval royal hygiene. Over the next 2 hours, you'll live it. You'll wake up in a canopied royal bed, smelling faintly of mildew and chamber pot. You'll eat breakfast next to a bedpan. You'll watch a king scratch his lice with a silver comb. You'll visit a queen's retiring room that's really just a glorified wooden seat over a hole. And you'll learn that royalty, for all their divine status, still pooped in buckets and believed bathing too often would open the pores to sin. This is not history as you learned it in school. This is the other history. The awkward, itchy, crusty underlayer that perfumes and court painters worked hard to hide. So get cozy. Let go of modern comforts. No deodorant, no toothpaste, no flushing toilets. Just pageantry, parasites, and powerful people who smelled like medieval armpits dipped in rose water and denial. Tonight's not just a bedtime story, it's a survival simulation. You're not just hearing about history, you're living it, one grody detail at a time. And best of all, you don't have to wake up there. So let's begin our descent into the silken bedsheets of rot, into royal routines of rinselessness, into the candlelit castles of bad breath and powdered wigs. Let's journey into why gross hygiene habits of medieval royalty. Sleep tight, but maybe keep a handkerchief close. You stir beneath a mountain of thick tapestries and embroidered linens, most of them stuffed with goose feathers and embroidered with gold thread. It should feel luxurious, but it doesn't, because the moment your eyes open, you're assaulted by smell. The bedclothes, while once expensive, haven't been properly laundered in months, maybe longer. They smell faintly of lavender, yes, but also of sweat, damp wool, and something deeper, more permanent. Human history baked into fabric. Congratulations! You're not a servant, you're not a peasant, you're royalty now. A king, or a queen, or some variation thereof. But before you get too excited, let's be clear. This version of royalty comes with power, yes, but not soap. You lie beneath a massive canopy bed, its curtains drawn to trap warmth during the cold stone nights. The mattress is lumpy and uneven, stuffed with whatever was available: wool, straw, horsehair, and regret. Beneath you, The linen sheets are stiff with body oils, because yes, even nobles sleep in their own grime. The air is heavy with the mingling scents of candle wax, chamber pot fumes, dried herbs, and the distinct sour-sweet tang of perfume, trying very hard to cover bodily decay. Somewhere near the door, someone has burned a bundle of rosemary twigs because the physician said it might ward off the bad air. Spoiler alert, it hasn't. A fire crackles low in the hearth, mostly ash now. Its warmth doesn't reach your feet. The stone walls of the chamber breathe cold through every crack, and the flagstone floor would chill your bones if you dared to step on it barefoot. Which you won't, because you're royal and you don't do barefoot. You shift, and the weight of your sleepwear reminds you that comfort is not a priority here. You're wearing a nightgown made of fine linen, possibly embroidered, possibly bejeweled. The fashion matters. The feel? Not so much. It's scratchy, heavy, and clings to your sweat-soaked skin like a judgmental shroud. You try to stretch, but the motion is restricted. Why? Because beside you in bed, there is someone else. Or several someone else's, perhaps your spouse, a few younger siblings, a nursemaid, or maybe even a royal dog or two. Beds, even royal ones, are crowded. Privacy is for myths. Across the room, a servant stirs from the straw mat they've laid near the fireplace. They've been there all night in case you woke up in need of water, a chamber pot, or the comfort of someone to complain to. They rub their eyes, yawn, and rise before you've even spoken. That's their job, to anticipate your discomfort, however unspeakable. But no amount of anticipation prepares them, or you, for the smell of your own personal close stool. The medieval toilet. It's just a richly decorated wooden chair with a hole in it, beneath which sits a ceramic pot. It's been sitting there all night. Full. Fermenting. Perfumed with rose petals, sure. But rose petals can only do so much. No one dares move it until you're out of bed. Royalty doesn't acknowledge bodily functions. They simply exist around them like a cloud of denial. You sit up, your hair is matted. If you're a man, you might be wearing a soft cap to preserve your curls. If you're a woman, your hair has been braided and coiled to preserve its shape for court. But let's be honest, it itches, and smells faintly of whatever oil was applied to it 3 days ago. Possibly almond, possibly rancid. A small group of attendants enters the room without knocking. Knocking is for people who aren't divine right incarnate. You sit still while they open the drapes, let in the chill, and begin the morning routine without asking if you're ready. Royalty doesn't need readiness. They need ritual. The room is now flooded with grey, diffused morning light from high, narrow windows. There's no glass, just oiled parchment stretched over wooden frames. It blocks the wind. Sometimes it also blocks most of the sun, so everything feels slightly foggy and damp, like living inside a wet piece of parchment. Birdsong? Barely audible over the wheezing of the bellows in the hallway, where someone is struggling to rekindle the main fire for the kitchens. The castle is awake now, but still cold. Always cold. One servant brings in a basin of water lukewarm. If you're lucky, icy if you're not. There's no plumbing. This water has been carried up from the courtyard cistern in heavy buckets and poured into a pewter bowl for your face. You don't touch it yet. That comes in part 3. First, you must be presented. Another attendant, likely a valet or a lady in waiting, announces your schedule for the day in a hushed tone, as if it's a sacred text. Your cousin is visiting. There's a mass at 11, and a barber surgeon has arrived to inspect the abscess on your uncle's foot. You nod solemnly, already regretting being born into power. You're not alone either. Your retinue is entering now. Courtiers, companions, sycophants. They come in to offer morning pleasantries and to assess how greasy your hair is. It's part of the job. Appearances are everything. Even when they reek, you shift again, and beneath you, the mattress makes a sound like dried moss being crushed underfoot. A servant leans down, holding out a hand, not to take yours, but to lift your foot into a velvet-lined slipper embroidered with pearls and probably crawling with moths. You step out of bed onto a sheepskin rug that's been replaced every 6 months, because even royalty can't avoid foot rot. The air in the room is beginning to shift. Candles are being lit, perfumes spritzed, tapestries adjusted. You're about to be washed, dressed, and sent out into the world of diplomatic smiling and lice inspections. But for a moment, you just stand there exhausted from the act of waking up. This is life in a medieval palace. Not all crowns are golden, some are just itchy and sit heavily on greasy scalp. You may be royalty, but in the morning, you're just another person who slept in a room full of body odor, damp fabric, and a pot of human waste wearing a crown. And you haven't even brushed your teeth yet. That comes next. You've finally managed to rise from the damp, perfumed swamp that is your royal bed, and now you stand, or more accurately, shiver at the edge of your own morning routine. Your attendants are already busy. One is unfolding a cloth of gold robe with fur trim so thick it could double as a small mammal. Another is pouring tepid water into a basin shaped like a lion's mouth. A third one, poor soul, is lifting the chamber pot and exiting the room with the resigned expression of someone whose job is quite literally to carry away the king's shame. Your hygiene routine begins now, not with a shower, mind you. That concept hasn't been invented yet, and not even with a proper bath. Bathing in water? Daily? Are you mad? That's a health risk in this century. According to the medical wisdom of your royal physicians, bathing too frequently weakens the body and opens the pores to dangerous vapors. You could catch a cold, or worse, syphilis. So instead of soaking yourself clean, you are wiped, dabbed, lightly scrubbed by someone whose job title is groom of the stool or lady's maid, depending on your station and your gender. They begin with your face. A cloth dipped in lukewarm water is pressed gently against your cheeks. Not rubbed, just patted. Royal skin is delicate after all. Soap? Perhaps, but only the most luxurious kind, made with olive oil, goat's milk, and enough crushed herbs to smell like an entire monastery garden. It doesn't lather. It's more of a suggestion than a cleanser. Your hands and forearms are wiped down next, followed by your neck. Your back? Maybe, if you're feeling especially adventurous. Legs? Unlikely. Feet? Only if they absolutely must be seen in public. Most of your body remains untouched, covered in layers of linen and denial. And now, your teeth. Ah, yes, the royal smile. You sit while an attendant presents you with a small bowl of powdered herbs, likely sage, cloves, or mint. If you're wealthy, or if your ancestors were particularly eccentric, crushed oyster shell mixed with burnt rosemary. This is your toothpaste. There is no toothbrush. Instead, you use a linen rag wrapped around your finger, or perhaps a twig frayed at one end. You rub this mixture across your teeth and gums, grimacing as the grit of the oyster shell scrapes away yesterday's venison grease. It tastes like dirt, slightly minty dirt, but still dirt. And the smell? Well, let's just say dental hygiene isn't a strong suit of the royal house. If you're particularly fashionable or paranoid, you might rinse your mouth with vinegar and honey water, swish once, and then spit it into a small silver basin. You may feel refreshed. You may also feel like you've gargled salad dressing. Either way, you're done. Deodorant? Not quite. But worry not, perfume is here to help. A servant brings over a vial of rose water and ambergris, a highly prized scent made from aged whale vomit. Yes, vomit, but it smells divine, and that's all that matters. They dab it behind your ears, on your wrists, and very delicately at the base of your neck. If you're a queen, maybe even between the toes, anywhere the nose might wander really. It doesn't cover the odor. It just layers over it, like a powdered wig on a flea-ridden scalp. Now, let's talk hair. If you're male, your hair is probably long, thick, and scented with pomade, made from lard and lavender. Your valet carefully combs through it with an ivory-handled comb, dragging it through knots, dust, and the occasional louse. You don't flinch. Royalty doesn't flinch. But the comb is immediately dunked into a bowl of vinegar afterward. If you're female, your maid spends the next hour unwinding braids, oiling the scalp, and reweaving your hair into a socially acceptable configuration, something that signals virtue, power, and the ability to suffer in silence. All of this just to sit at breakfast. And now, here it is, the meal you've been waiting for, royal breakfast. Except, it's not exactly what you imagined. There are no pancakes, no eggs and bacon, no orange juice or fresh croissants. Instead, a silver tray is placed before you with stale trenches of bread, possibly from yesterday, alongside a slab of cold meat pie, still congealed from last night's feast. A boiled egg, if you're lucky. Cheese, if you're luckier. Fresh fruit, only in summer. And only if your orchards haven't been decimated by frost, mold, or divine punishment. You sip from a goblet of watered wine, or perhaps weak ale, yes, even in the morning. Water is considered dangerous. Too many invisible humours floating in it. Parasites, spirits, so you start your day buzzed, just slightly. And let's not forget the pottage, a steaming bowl of something. It contains barley, and onions, and something else. Maybe turnip, maybe veal, maybe the last known squirrel in the royal gardens. No one knows for sure. It tastes like warm wallpaper paste, but it fills the stomach, and that's all that matters. Conversation is minimal. Eating is slow, deliberate, and deeply ceremonial. Someone plays a lute in the corner. A jester yawns behind a curtain, and the court physician arrives just in time to suggest adding a spoonful of ground unicorn horn to your broth. You nod thoughtfully and do not ask questions. Royalty never asks questions. Nearby, someone brings in a bowl of sweet-smelling herbs and places it under your chair, not for ambience, for odor control. The nobles of the court are slowly gathering, and nothing spoils a political alliance faster than the scent of post-pottage royalty. You dab your mouth with an embroidered napkin monogrammed with your house crest and rise, even though your stomach now feels like a stuffed badger. It's time to dress. You've been awake for an hour, and all you've done is sponge yourself, chew on chalk-dusted herbs, and eat soup for breakfast. But you are clean. Sort of. You are fed. Mostly, and you are prepared for the long, uncomfortable day of court life ahead. So onward, fragrant monarch, your chamber pot is empty, your breath smells of vinegar and cloves, and you are now officially fit to be seen. You've been wiped, dabbed, powdered, perfumed, fed, and mildly liquored by your morning ale. Now, it's time to dress, and not just in anything. Your royalty, which means you'll be clothed not for comfort or practicality, but for symbolism, ceremony, and pure, glorious display. Even if it means you can't breathe properly before noon, your attendants arrive bearing your garments as if they were handling sacred relic. They unfold your linen undershirt with delicate precision, even though it smells slightly of mildew from having been stored in a cedar chest next to a lavender sachet that died of old age 3 summers ago. You raise your arms. A servant slips the garment over your head, careful not to disturb your freshly combed, lice-ambiguous hair. This is layer 1. Then comes your chemise, or shift, essentially your medieval underwear. For men, it's long and shirt-like. For women, it reaches the ankles, sometimes decorated with lace or embroidery if you're feeling fancy. But make no mistake, this is not lingerie. It's scratchy, it's tight in the wrong places, and by midday it will be soaked through with sweat and court-related stress. Over that goes a doublet or a kirtle, depending on your station and gender. Think of it as a snug, padded vest or an early corset that gives you the posture of someone who hasn't sat down comfortably since childhood. Breathing becomes optional, but we're just getting started. Your stockings are rolled up and tied with ribbons just below the knee. They sag almost immediately. No elastic in this century, just hope and occasional garters. You step into a pair of pointed leather shoes that look impressive but feel like walking on thin regret. The soles are stiff, the insoles non-existent, and the smell suspiciously close to the royal stable. Then comes your outer layer, a gown, a surcoat, or a houppelande. This is where the real drama begins. The fabric is heavy, thick wool, brocade, velvet imported from Italy. It's dyed with indigo, saffron, crushed beetles, and medieval ambition. It drapes, it flows, it drags behind you like a funeral procession for common sense. If you're a queen, the sleeves are large enough to smuggle snacks or hide a diplomatic scroll. If you're a king, the collar is lined with fur from an animal extinct by the time your grandchildren are born. Emina, perhaps. Or stoat. Or something unfortunate with big eyes and soft feet. And the jewelry, you must never forget the jewelry. Gold rings adorn your fingers, each one bearing a family crest or a gemstone large enough to qualify as a choking hazard. Around your neck, a chain of office, heavy, decorative. A physical representation of your divine right to judge peasants while personally reeking of rosemary and leather polish. You are dressed now. You feel magnificent. You also cannot bend at the waist, and your armpits are experiencing a climate crisis. Now, the castle awaits. But before you go parading through your fortress of power, let's talk about that fortress. Your royal shelter. Your magnificent medieval palace. It is, in a word, cold. You step into the hallway and immediately feel the temperature drop 15 degrees. Despite the roaring fire in the hearth behind you, the castle is made almost entirely of stone that absorbs cold, amplifies echo, and grows its own breed of moss in the corners. There are no carpets. At best, there are woven rush mats, replaced occasionally meaning once a season, maybe. They crackle beneath your feet as you walk, and small insects occasionally flee in panic. That's normal. That's just Tuesday. Tapestries hang along the walls to insulate the rooms. In theory, in practice, they just add a decorative layer of damp fabric that smells faintly of old herbs and noble sweat. The windows are narrow slits, designed for defense, not lighting. Glass exists, technically, but not for you. You get oiled parchment or horn panels if you're lucky. They let in a weak, jaundiced light that turns everything a shade of yellow, best described as cheese fog. There is no central heating. There are no vents, just open fires in every room, roaring inefficiently, spitting sparks onto rush mats and filling the upper chambers with smoke. Chimneys exist, but they don't always work. So, if you suffer from chronic coughing, it's not consumption, it's castle life. Privacy? Almost non-existent. Servants are everywhere. They sleep in closets, under stairs, in corridors, ready to appear the moment your goblet is empty or your shoe buckle unbuckles itself. Your walls are thin, your secrets thinner. The royal bedchambers, while the most ornate, are also the most high maintenance. With their carved wood panels, creaking floorboards, and massive canopy beds, they look impressive. But they're drafty, musty, and often shared. Sometimes with your spouse, sometimes with your entourage, sometimes with the heir to the throne who still wets the bed and refuses to acknowledge it. And then there are the pests. Fleas, Lice, mice, flies. They love castles, they love royalty, and they especially love velvet. You can burn herbs in the corners. You can scatter lavender and thyme. You can leave bowls of vinegar under the table. But the truth is, if you stand still long enough, something will bite you. The castle, though regal, is also alive. It groans, it creaks, it leaks. Rainwater drips through the cracks in the stonework, especially near the stairs. The great hall smells of firewood and wet dog. The garderobes, your castle toilets, empty into a trench outside the walls that doubles as both sewage disposal and a cautionary tale. And yet, somehow, it's all quite beautiful. The flickering torchlight dances off the stone like gold. The stained glass chapel glows like a miracle when the sun hits it right. The ceiling beams are carved with dragons and saints. The dining hall echoes with footsteps that once belonged to kings, traitors, and heroes, sometimes all in the same person. This is your home, massive, cold, uncomfortable, and the physical embodiment of medieval status. You may not feel clean, you may not feel warm, but as you shuffle stiffly down the corridor in 15 pounds of embroidered wool, dodging servants, and hoping no one notices you scratching through your fur trim, you feel one thing, above all else, important. You're finally dressed, upright, and mobile, though your garments creak like old floorboards and weigh roughly as much as a modest goat. The court has gathered, the day has begun, and now, as royalty, you begin your work. Because yes, you work, not with a hoe or a hammer, perhaps, but your survival and the survival of everyone who depends on you demands a different kind of labor, the kind that wears a crown while slowly grinding its teeth behind a goblet of wine. First, you head to the Great Hall, your version of an office. It's cold, it's loud, it smells faintly of wet stone and yesterday's roast. A steward unrolls a parchment and begins reading your schedule for the day. It includes everything from listening to tenant disputes to inspecting a shipment of salted eels. At least one relative has arrived unannounced. There's a dispute over sheep grazing boundaries between rival barons. And your confessor wants to talk about your excessive use of perfume. It's not glamorous. It's not even particularly interesting. But it's endless. Because ruling in the Middle Ages means managing everything. You preside over land disputes, which means trying to appear wise, while two men scream about ditches. You listen to petitions from local lords, all of whom are trying to either gain more land, avoid more taxes, or marry someone suspiciously wealthy. You must dispense justice, which in this era means choosing between a fine, a hanging, or a strongly worded letter sealed in beeswax. At some point, you will inspect your kitchens. You won't be cooking, obviously, but your cooks will present you with their inventories. How much flour remains, whether the wine cellar is low, if the pickled fish barrels are still technically edible. You nod, say something vaguely wise, let the salmon rest another day, and move on. Then comes the accounts. A scribe with permanently ink-stained fingers presents a stack of ledgers that track your estate's finances. You pretend to understand them. You don't. No one does. They're written in a mix of Latin, Norman French, and chaos. But you must sign. Always sign, because if grain prices fall, if your forests are overhunted, if your taxes are too harsh, people starve. Rebellion brews. And that cozy fur-trimmed robe becomes a bullseye. Next, your real work begins. Ceremony. It starts with a feast. Not for you to eat yet, but to attend. You walk into the solar or the reception hall, nodding to everyone with your practiced royal expression. Part divine boredom, part vague condescension. Your nobles rise. Trumpets may play. Your job now is to smile. Not too warmly and not too long. A servant announces you. Another lifts your robe so it doesn't drag in the dirt. A third refreshes your goblet before you've even sipped it. You sit, and the feast begins. Except it's not for enjoyment. It's a performance. You're being watched by everyone: courtiers, scribes, spies. Possibly the cook's cousin who sells secrets for sixpence a rumour. Your posture is judged. Your appetite is noted. Your words will be repeated and twisted by sundown. So you labour through the meal with forked etiquette and spooned caution. You sip. You dab your mouth. You pretend not to notice the noble beside you whispering sweet treason into their wine. If you're a queen, your day includes overseeing the household staff, which is roughly 40 people all pretending not to hate each other. You approve menus. You assign bedchambers. You determine whether Lady Agnes is allowed to wear blue again after last week's incident. You also manage patronage, handing out favours, pensions, and positions like breadcrumbs to hungry pigeons. Say yes too often, and you bankrupt your coffers. Say no, and you gain an enemy with a sword and a grudge. And if you're a king, congratulations. It's time for military matters. No, you're not donning armour today, but you are expected to approve a new tax to fund your garrison, listen to a knight propose war over a goat, pretend to care about a coastal fortification in a place you've never heard of. Every conversation is strategic. Every smile is a test. Every minute of every day is spent performing authority so convincingly that no one dares challenge it until they do. But surely you think there must be a moment of peace. Ah, yes, the hunt, your one acceptable escape from courtly suffocation. Hunting is not just recreation. It's politics with a crossbow. You ride out, draped in fur, surrounded by hounds and sycophants. You chase boar, deer, or fox through royal forests, muddy fields, and occasionally the neighbour's manor if the trail leads that way. You risk injury, you risk embarrassment, but you also earn prestige. To be a good ruler, you must be seen killing something large, dangerous, and vaguely symbolic. And afterward, a banquet, where the same courtiers who watched you stab a stag now toast to your strength while trying to arrange your downfall. There's no such thing as rest in the royal machine. Even your leisure is labour. Even your silence is strategic. Even your sickness is public, attended by physicians who debate whether your bile is melancholic or just angry. And all the while, your survival hangs on dozens of things you cannot control. The harvest, the weather, the Pope, the plumbing, and your second cousin's ambition. You are the top of the pyramid, which means everyone below is sharpening a knife, a quill, or a prayer just in case you fall. So yes, you do work, not with your hands, but with your face, your voice, your signature, and your dangerously fragile reputation. Every nod is a negotiation, every glance a gamble, every single moment you are not sick, deposed, or accidentally poisoned is considered a successful day. And now, as the sun sinks behind the chapel roof and your royal shoulders ache beneath your fur-trimmed burden of sovereignty, you prepare for the evening rituals, because in this castle, this cold, perfumed, parasite-filled fortress of tradition and power, the day is never truly over. It just changes costume. You may rule over lands, castles, armies, and more sheep than you care to count. But make no mistake in this world, God rules over you, not symbolically, not metaphorically. Literally, every breath you take is monitored by heaven. Every misstep may offend a saint. Every rash, every thunderstorm, every spoiled egg is potentially a divine warning, and you, as royalty, are not exempt. You're closer to God, they say. but that only makes the pressure worse. The chapel bells ring across the castle as the evening shadows stretch like dark fingers along the stone corridors. It's time for Vespers, the evening prayer. A servant reminds you, not that you'd forget, because forgetting means tempting fate. You enter the castle chapel. It's small but opulent. The stone floor is cold beneath your slippers. The air smells of beeswax, incense, and the quiet panic of courtly repentance. Candles flicker in every direction, their flames dancing like trembling halos. Stained glass saints watch you with eyes that never blink. You kneel, or you try to. Your layers of embroidered velvet and fur don't make it easy, but you find the correct angle, a posture halfway between reverence and muscle cramp. The priest begins in Latin. You don't understand all of it. Most people don't, but that's not the point. The ritual is what matters. The motion, the rhythm, the visible display of piety. Because if the people think you're holy, they'll obey you. And if God thinks you're holy, maybe he won't send another flood, or another plague, or another cousin, claiming your throne by divine revelation. Your prayers aren't private. They're political. You kneel before the altar like a humble servant of Christ. But your mind is racing through alliances, tax rates, harvest reports, and whether your confessor saw you take that extra spoonful of spiced pudding last night, which might be gluttony, or pride. Depending on how you held the spoon, you rise, you cross yourself, you nod to the carved saints as if they're watching, and in your world, they might be, because this is the age of faith. And it's not just church on Sundays. It's a full-time, full-body, deeply superstitious lifestyle. The castle is filled with signs and symbols, carved crosses above doorways, reliquaries holding bones that may or may not belong to someone holy, tiny scraps of parchment with Latin blessings tucked into the lining of your robes just in case today is the day someone tries to stab you. But it's not just religion, it's superstition, always buzzing in the background like a swarm of invisible bees. If you spill salt, you throw a pinch over your left shoulder. If you hear an owl hoot 3 times, you cancel the hunt. If the cook drops a spoon, you expect a guest. If she drops a knife, you expect betrayal. And if you dream of blood, you immediately call for the priest, because dreams are messages, omens, previews. In the medieval mind, God sometimes talks in symbols, especially to royalty. Your astrologer has a chart for you. So does your wife and your mistress. Stars are tracked, moons observed. You don't sign treaties during Mercury retrograde, though you don't call it that. You just call it unfavorable alignment. And suddenly 3 countries have to wait to declare war. Your court is filled with men of faith and fear. The bishop advises you on matters of doctrine. Your confessor listens to sins you don't even enjoy committing. And your almoner distributes bread to the poor so God won't get too angry at the fact that your wine cellar contains 480 bottles of claret while half the village is chewing bark. But it's not just what you believe. It's how you act. You can't just attend Mass. You must be seen attending Mass. You can't just donate to a monastery. You must build one. A chapel, a shrine, a holy well, a stone cross in the middle of a damp forest that no one will visit but everyone will hear about. Piety is currency. Faith is PR. And sin is never just personal. It's political. Because if you fall ill, the people won't say it's bad luck. They'll say it's punishment. For pride, for lust, for that one time you looked too smug after winning at chess. Which brings us to penance. If you sin, and you will, you must confess. To a man who wears robes, speaks Latin, and asks disturbingly specific questions about how often you think about Lady Cecily from across the river. He assigns prayers, fasting, sometimes a pilgrimage. If you're lucky, it's just symbolic. If you're unlucky, you're riding to Canterbury in January on a sore saddle with a soul full of shame and blisters. Some kings go further. They beat themselves with whips. They walk barefoot to holy shrines. They sleep on straw and wear hair shirts that itch with divine intensity, all to prove to God and to their people that they are humble servants, not just privileged parasites. But despite all the priests and prayers, you keep something hidden in your chamber, in a drawer, a charm, a little pouch filled with dried herbs, blessed salt, and perhaps a bone. Not human, probably. A talisman, not officially approved by the church, but passed down through generations, because even kings hedge their bets, and queens whisper prayers to saints and to stars. And deep down, even the most powerful rulers of medieval Europe know the crown may be forged in gold, but its weight is carved by fear. So you cross yourself again. You touch your amulet beneath your tunic. You whisper a prayer that no one hears, but maybe, just maybe, someone answers. And you return to court, wondering if that sneeze you heard was just a cold or an omen. Because here, belief isn't just background noise. It's the atmosphere. It's the architecture. It's everything. The chapel is behind you. Your soul is scrubbed, or at least diplomatically rinsed. And now, finally, it's time for what court life considers relaxation. Dinner. Not dinner as you know it. Not a cozy evening meal at home. No candlelit intimacy. No quiet chewing while watching the fire crackle. This is feasting an event, a performance, a public expression of wealth, status, and stomach capacity. And it begins with you. You are seated at the high table, elevated above the rest of the hall, literally, so everyone can see you. The peasants might eat in shadows, but royalty dines in spectacle. The table is draped in linen. Silver goblets glint in the torchlight. Platters arrive in a constant procession. Roasted fowl, gilded pastries, sculpted jellies in the shape of saints and swans. Dishes dyed blue with saffron and almond milk, not for flavour, but for aesthetic. Because when you're royal, even your food has to make an entrance. But don't be fooled by the elegance. The reality is grimmier. That roasted peacock? Gorgeous. But it's been sitting out for hours. There's no refrigeration, no temperature control. By the time it reaches you, it's closer to decorative than digestible. And the smell? Oh, it's there. A thick stew of odours. Smoke from the hearth. Animal fat from the roasting spit. Perfume from every lady at the table trying to out-scent each other. And under it all the musk of sweat trapped in wool. Royal sweat, yes. But sweat nonetheless. You pick up your spoon carved from bone, possibly decorated with mother of pearl. You have no fork. Forks are foreign, distrusted, too pointy, too French. So you scoop, you dip, you tear. Your hands are involved. Everyone's hands are involved, which is why there's a bowl of rose water at your elbow for rinsing mid-meal. And yes, it's more symbolic than effective. Your fingers still glisten with goose grease. What do you eat? Bread dark, coarse, sometimes stale enough to be repurposed as a roof tile. Meat often oversalted to preserve it. Veal, pork, rabbit, sometimes boar. Occasionally deer if you're lucky and divided by or recently successful at hunting. Fish, especially on fasting days. Eel, herring, and the ever-popular mystery fish stew, which contains anything vaguely aquatic. Vegetables? Minimal. They're for peasants. Or monks. You might allow a turnip or two, maybe some peas drowned in butter. But no one's winning a salad competition in this century. Fruits? Yes, if you have access to orchards or expensive imports. Cherries, figs, and the occasional pomegranate, which you pretend to enjoy more than you actually do because it looks impressive on the table. And then there's the drink. You drink wine, always. Water is for washing your feet or dying of dysentery. Your wine is spiced, mulled, sometimes sweetened with honey, and occasionally mixed with herbs meant to aid digestion. In reality, it mostly masks the taste of borderline spoilage. You may also drink ale, especially if you're in Northern Europe. Thick, hearty, and safer than well water. By now, everyone's a little buzzed, including the priest. And what happens after dinner? Entertainment, but don't picture elegance. This is not chamber music and polite applause. This is a jester with bells on his hat doing a handstand in a corner while reciting crude poems about your mother-in-law. This is minstrels plucking at lutes, singing songs about tragic knights and horny nuns. This is a bear on a chain doing tricks on the banquet floor, or a trained monkey throwing fruit at your steward. This is storytellers, fire eaters, and acrobats, all performing not because they love the art, but because they love being alive. And when royalty is bored, heads roll. Sometimes, literally, if you're lucky, a noble will challenge another to a game, maybe chess or hazard, an early dice game. Gambling ensues. Someone always loses too much. Someone else cheats. Someone pretends not to notice. The night continues. Taverns aren't for royalty, but your lesser nobles might sneak out to one anyway. They're smoky, loud, and alive with bad ideas. The ale flows. The music is rough. The dancing is borderline violent. Someone gets thrown into a pig trough. Everyone pretends it was charming. Back in the castle, the mood has shifted. The laughter is louder. The jokes are crueler. The flirting begins. Court is a battlefield of whispers. Affairs begin over spilled wine and eye contact. Hands linger a second too long on goblets. Courtiers smile too much, or not enough. You pretend not to notice, but you do, because this is your court, and every laugh, every glance, every toast is a clue. Someone is plotting something. Someone always is. You lean back in your high-backed chair, your stomach heavy with grease and regret, your fingers still sticky with meat juices, your breath tinged with clove wine and suspicious trout. And still, the show continues. Your fool returns with a pig's bladder on a stick and smacks your cousin. Your cousin laughs too hard. The music swells. The candles burn lower, and you wonder if you slipped away. Would anyone notice? Probably. Because royalty isn't allowed to disappear. You are the axis of this entire ridiculous machine. So you sip more wine. You smile at the jester. You pretend your stomach isn't rebelling against that third pigeon pie. And you keep watching, because here, meals aren't meals. They are rituals. They are tests. They are political theatre disguised as overcooked meat and undercooked song. And your only job is to endure it gracefully, even while someone under the table quietly throws up in their sleeve. The feast has ended. The candles are low. The fire has collapsed into soft embers, and the court has either wandered off to gossip in corridors or collapsed somewhere between velvet cushions and philosophical wine-induced despair. You retire to your chamber, but something's wrong. A tightness in your chest, a pain in your side, a cold sweat that clings to the back of your neck like a warning. You say nothing, of course. You smile politely. You nod at your attendants. But inside, a single thought has taken root, and it's blooming fast. Is this the beginning of death? Because in this world, it always could be. You can survive court intrigue. You can dodge assassins, evade scandals, and outmaneuver the Pope himself, but you cannot escape the cold hands of medieval illness. No one can, not even royalty. Especially not royalty. Your lifestyle, rich food, stale air, crowded halls, constant travel has made you a prime candidate for every disease that stalks the land. And oh, how many there are. Let's start with the basics. Colds, fevers, coughs. Nothing modern medicine would blink at. But here, They're not minor. They're ominous. A cough can mean tuberculosis. A fever might be typhoid. A boil on your arm could be plague. Your court physician is summoned. A man with half the knowledge and double the confidence, carrying a leather bag full of herbs, leeches, and deeply questionable judgment. He arrives quickly. Your heartbeat's echo hasn't even faded from the stone walls. He examines you by candlelight, muttering in Latin. He presses your wrist, stares at your tongue, sniffs your breath, and declares something about imbalanced humours. Of course, always the humours. According to medieval medicine, your body is a fragile vat of 4 fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Get the proportions wrong, and you suffer. Fever, too much blood. Melancholy, too much black bile. Toothache, possibly an impolite demon. Treatment? Let's find out. The options are creative. First, bleeding. The physician pulls out a small knife, or, if he's fancy, a brass bleeding bowl engraved with astrological signs. He makes a shallow cut in your arm. Blood flows. You win. He nods sagely. Excellent, he says. The disease is leaving. You're not so sure. Next comes a poultice, a warm paste of onions, herbs, and possibly pigeon dung, applied directly to your chest. Then a draught of bitter liquid containing wine, powdered wormwood, and maybe a bit of ground pearl. If you're lucky. If not, it's just wine and someone's wishful thinking. If your symptoms continue, more drastic measures are proposed. Cupping. Hot glass cups applied to the skin to draw out bad humours. Leeches. Applied to sensitive areas with horrifying precision. Herbs. Dried and burned in your chamber to purify the air, except the herbs smell like old socks and set off your cough again. Sometimes a priest is called, not because you're dead yet, but because you might be soon, and it's always better to have your soul ready, just in case your bowels give out before your last words are properly poetic. This is the background noise of royal life. Not just ceremony and strategy, but the constant ticking clock of mortality. Because you know the truth. Everyone does. Your status means nothing to fleas. The Black Death doesn't care if you're crowned or common. Smallpox laughs at your sapphire ring. Dysentery doesn't ask for your lineage before emptying your bowels at both ends until you're pale, whimpering, and praying to every saint you can name. And even if you survive, you're never the same. Infections leave scars. Fevers burn your strength. Toothaches fester into jaw rot. There's no Novocaine, no antibiotics, just cloves, vinegar, and the hope you pass out before the barber surgeon finishes. Yes, barber surgeons, because medicine and hair cutting are the same profession in this century. The man who trims your beard in the morning might remove your infected toe by evening with the same knife. Was it cleaned? Maybe. Did he wash his hands? Absolutely not. And even if you escape illness for now, you're still afraid of the things you can't name. The falling sickness, seizures, the king's evil, scrofula, a swollen neck gland that some believe you can cure just by touching it. Because you're royal. You're sacred. You're chosen by God, and so people line up, hundreds of them, sick and hopeful, waiting to be touched by your trembling, possibly feverish hand. You smile, you bless, you touch their sores, and hope their afflictions don't crawl up your sleeve, because deep down, you know you're not immune. You just have better pillows, and maybe a jewel-encrusted crucifix to clutch when the night sweats come. You watch your friends die. Your courtiers vanish, one by one, from bad humours and evil air. You send your youngest child away to the countryside the moment they sneeze. You sleep beside rosemary and dried sage. You wear amulets filled with dried blood and prayers. You whisper to saints whose names you've never said aloud, because in this time, death is everywhere. in the bread, in the water, in the breath of your steward, in the rat that scurried under your throne just after Mass. You can feel it in your joints. You can smell it in the hallway. You can see it in the priest's eyes when he brings the communion wafer with a trembling hand. And so you live every day like it might be your last, not with joy, but with ritual, with superstition, with a desperation so profound it hides under your velvet robes like a shadow. You are royal, but death doesn't care. The plague has no manners. The fever doesn't bowl. And when the moment comes, when the sweat breaks, when your vision dims, when the physician leans in and murmurs something in Latin that sounds suspiciously like surrender, you'll be reminded, for the 1000th time, you may rule a kingdom, but your body, it answers to someone else entirely. You may be king, queen, or something in between, but tonight, let's pull back the veil on what life actually looks like inside the royal family. It isn't all lullabies and nursery rhymes. In the medieval world, family is not a refuge. It's a system, a contract, a battlefield lined with bloodlines, dowries, expectations, and heirs. Always, always heirs. Let's start with women. If you are a woman, especially a noble or royal one, your life was written before you ever took your first breath. You are, quite literally, a vessel for bloodlines, for alliances, for sons. You are not your own, you belong to your father. Until you belong to your husband, until, if you're very, very lucky, you become a widow and finally belong to yourself. Your childhood is brief. You're taught to stitch, pray, curtsy, and smile. You learn to read but only approved texts, religious ones, moral ones, nothing too empowering. You are not taught to fight, you are taught to endure. Then, at around 12 or 13, sometimes younger, you are told you're betrothed to a man you've never met, twice your age, maybe older, maybe much older. He smells like vinegar and goat's wool. He already has children. He might already have syphilis. It doesn't matter. What matters is that his lands border yours, or his father owes your father a favor, or your dowry will secure peace between two deeply untrustworthy kingdoms. On your wedding day, you are dressed in silk and scented oils, and everyone pretends this is the happiest day of your life, but it isn't. It's just the beginning of your job, childbearing. You are expected to produce sons quickly, safely, repeatedly. No pressure, except that your failure might trigger a war. You give birth not in hospitals, but in candlelit rooms, surrounded by midwives, servants, and saints' relics. The pain is unmedicated. The process is dangerous. And every scream echoes through a building that already knows how this ends, because childbirth is the leading cause of death for women, royal or not. There's bleeding, infection, tearing, stillbirth, fevers that burn for days and then silence forever. And even if you survive, there's no rest, because your child might not. Infant mortality is relentless. Half of all children die before age 5. Coughs become fatal. Fevers kill in a night. Teething causes seizures. Milk goes sour. Wet nurses come and go like a revolving door of worry and whispered prayers. You are encouraged not to grow too attached until the child speaks, but of course you do. You fall in love with every breath they take, and then you watch them wheeze and fade and disappear into a tiny carved coffin you can't bear to look at. That was your 5th. You have 6 more, because stopping is not an option. You must provide an heir and a spare, and a 3rd, and a 4th. And if your husband dies and leaves you childless, you are worthless. Even queens can be replaced. Now, let's speak of children, not the ones who died, but the ones who lived, because living didn't always mean surviving. Royal children are not cradled in comfort. They're groomed, coached, controlled. A prince is a symbol. From the moment he can walk, he is being shaped to rule. He learns Latin, law, falconry, swordplay, religion, diplomacy. He's watched constantly. He mustn't cry. He mustn't fail. He must never show weakness, because if he does, someone will notice. And there is always someone watching. A princess, on the other hand, is trained to marry, not for love, not for choice, for strategy. She may be promised at age 7, sent away at 10, married at 12, pregnant at 13, and homesick for a place she will never see again. She will smile through it, because royal daughters aren't daughters. They are diplomatic tools, and their success is measured in how quietly they vanish into someone else's dynasty. But family life isn't all fear and performance. Sometimes there's laughter. You might share a moment with your child at dawn, tickling their tiny feet while they coo and drool on your velvet sleeve. You might sneak a honeyed cake to your daughter when the nurse isn't looking. You might see your son take his first wobbly steps across the rush-covered floor and feel, for just a moment, that perhaps the world isn't so cruel. But then someone coughs, and you remember, this joy is fragile. This love is risky. This bond is temporary, and that's what makes it unbearable and irresistible. So you teach your children not to love too loudly, not to hope too openly. You teach them to survive by making them strong. You teach them that every smile must be earned and every secret guarded. And when the time comes, you marry them off. You watch them disappear behind banners and blessings and wedding feasts. And you hope that they survive, because in this world, family is power, but it's also pain. And every night you lie in bed beneath velvet blankets and embroidered prayers, wondering whether the next letter from the coast will be a birth announcement or a death notice. You whisper your child's name into the dark. You listen to the wind rattle the shutters, and you sleep, not peacefully, but watchfully, because royalty has heirs. But parents, no matter how noble, have hearts. And in this world, hearts break quietly, always. Afternoon in the castle is when the walls begin to creak. Not from age, though yes, they're ancient and full of drafty regrets, but from tension. The performance of morning is over. The illusion of divine order has started to fray. And what's left now is exactly what you feared. People, you can't escape them. You rule them. They surround you. They kneel, flatter, scheme, whisper. They bow while plotting. They serve while resenting. And as the sun reaches its highest point, shining weakly through horn-paned windows and onto the tiled floors of your increasingly crowded court, the mask slips. It starts small. A steward mutters under his breath. A cousin sneers at another over inheritance. A guard spits too close to a noble's shoe. A clerk accidentally misfiles a land deed, plunging 2 families into a feud that will outlive 3 kings and at least 1 saint. Welcome to the real work of ruling, conflict. You preside over disputes that defy logic. Arguments over oxen, over marriage contracts, over the colour of a lord's banner, and whether it's too similar to another's. Someone accuses someone else of stealing pigs. Someone else counters with witchcraft. A bishop demands compensation for a goat who wandered into his cloister and defiled a statue of Saint Jerome. You try to appear wise, patient, unbothered, but your teeth ache from clenching. You sentence one man to a fine, another to time in the stocks, a third banished, and you realize every decision makes someone hate you, even when you're right, especially when you're right. Meanwhile, the nobility bickers like overfed wolves in embroidered leggings. Jealousy is the air they breathe, and you are both the prize and the predator. They fight for influence, for proximity, for favors and marriages, and whispered promises in candle-lit corridors. A baron's daughter weeps in the corridor. A knight throws a glove at another's feet. A duel is narrowly avoided because the wine ran out before anyone could find a clean sword. And beneath all this, justice, the illusion of it, must be maintained. But justice here doesn't mean fairness. It means control. And so the punishments come. This afternoon alone, you've ordered a baker whipped for selling light bread, a poacher's hand branded with a hot iron, a scribe jailed for copying royal letters without permission. The punishments are harsh, not because you enjoy cruelty, but because the alternative is chaos. And chaos doesn't ask permission. It doesn't care about rank. It eats kingdoms from the inside. Still, it wears you down. The weight of maintaining order in a world where order is just a fancier word for fear. Fear of rebellion, fear of scandal, fear of famine, flood, or pestilence. Fear of your own people, because while your castle is grand, it sits in the middle of a land riddled with tension. The peasants grumble. The harvest is poor. The taxes are high. You haven't ridden out in a parade in months. They miss seeing your face, or more likely they miss the bread thrown from your carriage wheels. And their patience? It thins like soup in a famine year, which means you must watch everyone. You must know who speaks to whom, who rides at night, who prays too loudly, who drinks too much, who doesn't drink at all. Spies are everywhere. Some work for you, some work for your enemies. Some just want a better life and are willing to trade your secrets for a warm meal and a softer bed. Even your servants are a danger. They know your routine, your habits, your weaknesses. They dress you, they feed you, they see you at your most vulnerable, half naked and half drunk, bleeding from a boil or coughing through a fever. And they could kill you easily. A slip of something into your soup, a pillow pressed a moment too long, or just a loose word whispered to the wrong ear about what they saw when they changed your linens. So you watch them, and they watch you, and everyone smiles. You retreat to your private solar, a chamber meant for rest. But instead of peace, you find petitions, letters, demands, accusations. A priest accuses a local widow of heresy. A landowner wants permission to burn down a rival's field. A disgraced knight begs for forgiveness and a new horse. All of it ends up on your desk, and each piece of parchment is heavier than the last. Your seal ring, once a symbol of authority, now just makes your hand ache. You press it into the hot wax and wonder if the person on the other end will thank you or curse you. Because in this world, there are no good choices, only strategic ones. You are surrounded by people, but you are alone, because to trust is to gamble. And the only thing more dangerous than a traitor is a friend who might become one. So when you hear shouting in the courtyard, two guards brawling over a rumor about your steward, you don't flinch. When you hear the cook sobbing in the kitchen because her son was caught stealing grain, you don't go to her. When you pass a noblewoman in the corridor and she refuses to meet your gaze, you remember that, because every frown is a message, every silence a warning. This is royalty in the afternoon hours. Not pageantry, paranoia, not command, survival. And as you sign the last document, dismiss the last petition, and prepare for the farce of dinner number 2, you glance at your reflection in the polished shield hanging by the door. You look tired, older than you did this morning, because ruling isn't just about gold, glory, or godliness. It's about enduring. Through lies, through threats, through the slow, suffocating weight of being watched by everyone, trusted by no one, and remembered only when things go wrong. The sun has slipped beneath the hills, bleeding orange into black. The castle glows with dying torchlight. The day, full of ceremony, conflict, and carefully measured smiles, is over. And now comes the part you fear most. Night. You may be royalty. Your crest may hang on every wall. Your name may echo in poems and prayers. But when the sun sets, all your power is just noise in the dark. Because in this world, night is not a time for rest. It is a time for fear. You walk the long corridor back to your chambers. Your slippers pad silently over the rush-covered floor. The shadows stretch and curl along the stone walls, shifting like things alive. A servant walks ahead of you with a candle, shielding it from the draft. The flame flickers violently, as if it knows something you don't. Your footsteps echo. Each one sounds like someone following. Your guards, if you trust them, stand posted at the door to your chamber. But you've heard the stories. Kings smothered in their beds, queens poisoned by their ladies, uncles who vanished in the night and returned only as rumors. You nod to the guards. They bow. You enter. Your bedchamber is still, silent. The fire has been stirred. The sheets turned down. Your nightgown, a heavy thing that smells faintly of lavender and cold iron, is laid out. No one speaks, because night is sacred or cursed. Or maybe both. You undress slowly. The room is cold. Your breath fogs as you exhale. Somewhere beyond the window, an owl cries. The wind moans low through the courtyard arch. A shutter bangs once, twice, before someone below rushes to secure it. You climb into your bed, or rather, your fortress of fabric. Thick woolen blankets, stuffed mattresses, curtains drawn shut to keep in warmth, and if superstition is to be believed, to keep out spirits, because yes, even royalty believes in ghosts. You sleep with a relic beneath your pillow, a splinter of a saint's bone, a finger length of cloth said to have touched the Virgin's statue. You don't even remember when you started sleeping with it, only that you're afraid not to. Your physician insists it's just nerves, or wind in the walls, or perhaps a slight imbalance of your black bile. But you know better. The castle feels different at night. The silence is heavier. The corridors are longer, and the servants move like ghosts themselves, careful not to wake anything ancient that might be listening. You've had nightmares for weeks, the same one, a shape at the end of your bed, watching, never speaking, just waiting. Tonight, you will dream it again, but first, you must try to sleep, which is no small feat, because royalty does not sleep like common folk. You sleep in armor, metaphorically, if not literally. One ear open, one eye half-lidded, your thoughts racing. Will you wake up tomorrow? Will your food taster fail you? Will your enemies strike while your guards snore? And even if no assassin comes, the castle holds other dangers. The fire may die. The coals may fall. The rushes on the floor may catch. You've seen entire wings of the palace burn overnight. Gone in hours. People trapped. Screams muffled by smoke and stone. You still remember the smell. So every night, someone checks the hearth 3 times. And every night, you wonder if it's enough. Then, there's the cold. It creeps in despite the bed curtains, despite the heavy tapestries, despite the coals hidden beneath your sheets in ceramic warmers. It bites at your toes, your fingers, your lungs. You sleep in layers. You sweat, then shiver. You dream of snow and fire and things that crawl. And if you finally sleep, it isn't peaceful. Because sleep in this world isn't just a break from life. It's flirting with death. You've seen too many people lie down healthy and never rise again. The morning arrives. The servant knocks. They do not hear a reply. They enter quietly. And what they find is a royal corpse, blue-lipped and stiff. It happened to kings, to queens, to children, mothers, fools, and saints. Sleep is not safe here. Not truly. Even the act of dreaming is risky. The wrong dream, a heretical one, might be seen as a sign of madness or possession or sin. So some monarchs refuse to sleep lying down. They sleep sitting, propped up, to avoid looking too dead. Others chant psalms before bed. Still others keep a sword within reach, just in case the night brings more than dreams. You've done all of it, and still the dark creeps in, and still the dreams return. Not all are nightmares. Sometimes you see old friends, children you buried, lovers you regret. Other times you see blood, fire, faces without eyes, rooms with no doors, a jester laughing, a priest weeping, a shadow that speaks in your voice. You wake gasping, your sheets soaked, the relic gone from beneath your pillow, only to find it again later tucked beneath your chamber pot, as if it fled during the night. No one believes you, no one speaks of it, because night is a taboo, a liminal time, and no one, not even a monarch, wants to know what walks the halls after midnight. So you endure it, night after night, wrapped in furs and fear, dreaming of fire, listening for footsteps, whispering prayers into the dark, because in this world, sleep is not rest, it's rehearsal, and one night you will not wait, and your crown will pass to someone else, and they too will lie beneath heavy blankets, listening, waiting, fearing, just like you. The fire has died down to a soft glow. The rushes on the floor are quiet. Your guards have stopped pacing. The last servant has bowed and backed out of the room, leaving you alone with your thoughts and your fears. The castle sleeps. At least you hope it does. But after everything you've lived through today, can you? Let's take a breath. You've survived a medieval day in the life of royalty, and it was awful. Let's not romanticize it. Your day began in a bed that smelled like damp velvet and dying herbs. You awoke to a chamber pot fermenting beside your slippers. You were wiped with a cloth instead of bathed. You brushed your teeth with crushed shells and old mint. You were dressed in 20 pounds of fabric designed by sadists. You drank wine at breakfast because water might kill you, and then you sat through a ceremonial meal where someone juggled geese for entertainment and no one acknowledged the rat under the table. You passed judgment on land disputes. You smiled at backstabbing nobles. You listened to sermons and songs and a jester who really should have been arrested. You feared plague, poison, fire, and God, all before your second goblet of spiced wine. And through it all, you endured. Not with comfort, not with grace, but with the exact same thing that carried every royal through the Middle Ages: stubbornness. Because life in a medieval castle wasn't designed to be enjoyed, it was designed to be survived. And if you were royal, that just meant you had more candles, more fabric, and a better seat when things fell apart. You were watched constantly. You could trust no one. You loved your children while preparing to bury them. You blessed your food and still feared your first bite. You ruled your land from a throne of lies, secrets, superstition, and indigestion. And the people called you holy, but you were just human, frightened, unwashed, paranoid, and tired. So incredibly tired because being royalty wasn't about glory. It was about enduring discomfort with flair. Let's be honest, you didn't have a good day. You woke up cold. You spent the day itchy. You ate things that bled, fizzled, or jiggled. You smiled at people who wanted your title. You feared death from every direction: illness, betrayal, childbirth, sin, or just a sharp knife hidden in someone's boot. And yet you still mattered, because people believed you did. That belief, however, misplaced, was power, but it wasn't peace. It wasn't rest, which is what we're here for, isn't it? So let's finally let go of the weight of your crown. Let's loosen the imaginary corset, unbuckle the golden shoes that pinched, peel off the velvet, silk, and embroidered layers of stress. And remember, you don't live there, not anymore. You don't have to wake up next to a chamber pot. You don't have to eat pottage that's 20% rat, 80% hope. You don't have to bow to bishops or pretend not to notice lice. You have soft sheets, clean water, toothpaste that doesn't cut your gums, thermostats, noise machines, air that doesn't smell like rosemary and damp regret. You live in a world where kings don't get boils in public, and queens don't have to die at 14 during childbirth to secure a trade alliance. You are safe, warm, and you, dear listener, are allowed to rest. So breathe in and out. Let the stone walls fade. Let the torches extinguish. Let the feasts and fanfare dissolve into silence. Let the itchy fabric melt into soft cotton. Let the muttering monks, the jester's bell, the cold wind of the tower all fall quiet now, because the castle is gone, and in its place, only stillness. Your modern room, your quiet fan, your cool pillow, your own bed, where you are the ruler of nothing. And finally, that's a blessing. Tonight, you don't need to issue decrees. You don't need to fake a smile. You don't need to wash your hands in rosewater and pretend that's hygiene. You don't need to watch your food for poison or your friends for knives. You are not a medieval royal tonight. You are a person safe in your own bed, in your own world, where the scariest part of the night is maybe forgetting to charge your phone. So let your mind drift now. Let it float gently away from the castle, away from the fear and the frost and the foxglove, back to where it's quiet, where it's safe, where nothing smells like old meat pies. Let sleep take you. And remember, you don't have to wake up in that world. You don't have to wake up in that bed. You don't have to be royalty. You just have to rest. So tonight, as you drift off, remember, you don't have to wake up in medieval Europe. Sleep well,